piano lessons like everybody else. But in those days, the teachers would try to teach you classical music.
Yeah.
I couldn't have cared less about classical music in that era. If they brought me up on rock or pop, I might have stayed with it.
Yeah.
I have some talent, but not a lot.
Oh.
That's the truth of it. I could never have made a career in it. So my aunt bought this. She must have had a lot of talent because it was bought during the Depression.
Yes.
And I have the original bill of sale. She paid $1,500 and turned in an old upright. I was the only person in the family that was interested that got any musical talent.
Yeah.
So it just became mine. Down through the years, every tuner that's come in has wanted to buy it. Okay. Because the late 1920s were so special.
Yeah. Well, I can see the Steinway logo. Mistakes. I'm not. That, by the way, is a piano version of the opening of Beethoven.